Welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out, a podcast dedicated to feeling it all one breath and scream at a time. I'm Katie Healy, your host, and I am so excited to share today's episode with you. Today's guest is Krista Williams. Krista Williams is the co-host of Almost 30 and Morning Microdose podcast, an internationally recognized speaker, coach, and author dedicated to guiding individuals through life's biggest transitions. Today on the pod, Krista and I are talking all things about her new book. Her first book, Almost 30, a definitive guide to a life you love for the next decade and beyond, co-written with Lindsay Simsick, releases on June 3rd, 2025. We're diving into the book, all about her Saturn Return, everything she's learned, how she shares that not only with her Almost 30 audience and community, but through this book. Saturn Return was such a transformational time in my life, maybe the most transformational, when I really started to dive into all things astrology, breathwork, this path I currently find myself on, and Almost 30 had a really big part in that. So I'm so excited to share more about that with you. Having Krista on this podcast is a treat, period. But as my first guest, just feels so amazing in every way. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. I hope you find it supportive, freeing, and before we get into things, let's start our episodes like we do moving forward every week. We'll take a breath or a scream, whatever you need. So find your seat or your feet underneath you, even if you're in public, if you're in the car, on the subway, on your couch, wherever you are, just taking a moment to ground yourself, eyes closed or open. And as always, freedom to take a deep breath in and out, let out a sigh or a big sound. Today I'm going with a sigh, but if you need that big scream, you take it. We'll do it together. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Big sigh or sound out through your mouth. Okay. Let's get into this episode with Krista Williams. Welcome, Krista Williams, to Breathe In, Scream Out. I am so happy to have you here.
I'm excited. I feel like we're already flowing, so it'll be good to have a really juicy conversation this Friday afternoon.
Yes. And my first question I usually start with is, what are you screaming about?
Lately, I've been screaming about our book. You know, Lindsay and I, my best friend and podcast co-host, wrote a book about a year and a half ago, and it's called Almost 30, and it's coming out now. And I feel so proud of it. And I think I've earned that now at this point, because it's been so hard to come to the point where I feel proud. I like it. I'm ready to share it, promote it, and receive. And so now I feel at the point where I've done so much self-work in this process to receive it and feel excited about it. So I'm screaming about our book.
I love that. And I'm so excited to get into the book. I loved it. Saturn Return. My Saturn Return was probably the most powerful time in my life, but I wanted to share with you and everyone how important Almost 30 has been in my life. I've been listening to the podcasts for a long time, probably since 2018. And I met one of my best friends through Almost 30. And not only did I meet one of my best friends, Hannah, I also started offering free workshops during the pandemic for Reiki and breathwork to the Almost 30 community. And that's really how I started to facilitate group work virtually. But it was such an amazing, supportive, incredible way to do that. So thank you for creating the space. Not only just the podcast, but also the community you and Lindsay have created has been so impactful in my own life.
Thank you. And I remember that now in 2020 with our ambassador groups and then our Facebook group. We had so much connection, and it was so helpful to have some of the girls just share their gifts with each other in community. And yeah, nothing makes me happier than hearing that. So thank you for saying that. It means a lot.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And now the book. I've been reading it. I love it. A lot of my listeners, even someone who listened to my first episode, didn't even realize she had a moon sign. So I kind of want to start at the beginning. And, it's heavily based around your Saturn return, a time in your life. So can you tell us what a Saturn return is and how it impacts the specific time in your life in your late 20s?
Yeah, so the Saturn return is almost like a cosmic initiation. It's really the point in your life where everything kind of comes to a head. It's when Saturn hits the same part in your chart as where you were when you were born. And what it brings up is a lot of opportunities for growth and transformation, and really for you to evaluate if you're living a life that's aligned to your soul. So you're going to have trials and tribulations in career, relationships, friendships, money, sex, like every area of life. If you're not aligned, if you're aligned, it can be a really beautiful opportunity. It can be a beautiful moment. But for many of us from in our late 20s and for the most of beginning of our lives, we're not living a life in our fullest alignment or our deepest truth. We usually lose that somewhere when we're younger. After being a child, you kind of have that innocence, and then you lose that connection to your true self or your true essence just through growing up in a normal human life and society. So our Saturn return period can be super challenging and hard and rock bottom filled and feeling lost filled, but it ultimately leads you to something greater and something better and something that's more aligned for you. So our dream and wish at almost 30 is for people to meet their Saturn return period with a sense of excitement for what's to come and a sense of co-creation with the universe to create what it is that they're wanting to live, wanting to have in life, and ultimately to feel less alone, because that's how I felt during my Saturn return period. Was I felt incredibly alone and I felt incredibly lost. And yeah, it was hard, but it ultimately brought me closer.
I love that. And thank you for sharing all that, giving us the explanation. And something I really loved I loved many things about the book, but the thing that stood out to me the most was the reframe, kind of the way it's all about the mindset work that goes into this in any transformative period in your life. And yes, it's super challenging. My Saturn return was when everyone in my life seemed to have died. There's no better way to say it. Saturn was in my 8th house, death, birth, transformation, and I lost physically a lot of people. I lost my dad, both my grandfathers, my mentor, and I did not know at the time what was happening. It kind of all aligned similar to the way it happened for you and Lindsay, and I just took it as an opportunity to make a change. Now I see it kind of as a gift, or an expansion of possibility. And I love that the book offers so many opportunities to reframe your mindset around this challenge that we kind of see it as something in the moment as like grin and bearing it. And then it becomes all the possibility that we open up to.
Yeah, I was talking about this recently, the art of the reframe, and having people in your life or being someone that can reframe every situation or scenario for its greatest good. As an example, I got divorced 2 years ago, and the art of the reframe would be, what if letting go of this relationship allows them to find a person that's even better to them? What if letting go of this relationship helps you find a relationship that's even a better fit for you? What if there's a better opportunity and outcome than you could ever expect coming? And to really see everything in its positivity, in its creativity, in its possibility, because this is the thing. I think our minds, because we have negativity bias, always think that the worst possible outcome is going to happen. If I get divorced, I'm going to then never find someone. I'm never going to be happy again. I'm going to, be miserable for the rest of my life. And just as much as that is true, all the other positive possibilities are true. It's really just what we spend our energy and intention on. And so when we can be in a place of reframe and just really seeing things as happening for our greatest good, because they truly are, life can get so much better and playful and more fun. And as I've added in that element, in my life and my experience, things have just gotten so much better, and things have just felt better, and more magic and miracles has come than I could have ever thought possible.
I love that. And it's so hard in the moment to see the challenge as a gift. And I still struggle with calling so much of my loss a gift, or those things, those cliches, like everything happens for a reason. But the reality, I know deep in my bones and my soul, the reality is, if all of that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be sitting here doing what I'm doing today. It wouldn't have opened me up to Reiki and breath work and all the things that I do. And I'm wondering how your Saturn return opened you up to all of this transformation, whether there was one part which you and Lindsay really break down in the book, many parts of the transformation. But for you, what do you feel like was the most transformative part of your Saturn returns?
Yeah. For me, the things that really broke down and came up were issues related to my body and the hate I had for my body, the war I was at with my body, the way that I struggled with my body and eating and working out and all of that. So that was really coming through because that had been something I had lived with my whole life. And then also around purpose. I have been someone that my entire life wanted to do something with my life, wanted to serve, wanting to do something big. I always have believed that I'm made for more. And I'm sure a lot of you, I'm sure you and a lot of your audience can relate to that feeling, that sort of soulful pull and drive to something greater and bigger. And I wanted to find my purpose. I wanted to find a purpose for being here. I was existential since I was like 10. So that kind of thing, while it seems inspiring to be like, I'm going to find my purpose and all these things, for me, it caused me so much pain and so much anxiety and so much depression because I just kept myself up at night wondering and looping and thinking and stressing and not feeling enough or not feeling like I was doing the right thing or, wanting to be somewhere that I wasn't. And so both of those were kind of coming to a head at that time where with my health, I got sick. I had really bad adrenal fatigue and hormone health issues. So I put on a bunch of weight in a really short time. I couldn't get out of bed. I was just feeling completely out of sorts. I was moody. There was just a bunch of issues with my body because of the way I had been treating it and talking to it. And then with my purpose, it was just like the drive and desire was so great that I drove myself to a point where I didn't want to be around because I felt like if I didn't have purpose, what was the purpose? And I really found at the bottom of both of those, at the very bottom, hitting that rock bottom and knowing that there was nowhere else to go but up, that I could really make change and surrender to the possibility of things shifting. And that's when things started to shift for me in my Saturn return.
Thank you for sharing that. And those were two of my favorite parts of the book. I too struggle and have struggled so much with my body image, my feelings towards my body, my beliefs about my body, and my purpose. I think maybe it's just ingrained in me. Maybe it's my birth chart, people born in like that 1988, 1989 range with all that Capricorn, that Pisces North Node, like something deeper, something more. And it can really activate this part, again, this negative mindset, this bias. We have these desires and we start to think like why we can't have the thing instead of if we have the desire, that just means it's even more possible if it's within us. And speaking first to all the work you did around body image, befriending your body, learning how to love, accept the body, what's some advice you have for folks who maybe struggle in this area? I know I certainly still come up against it. I know you've done a lot of work with your Metamorphosis program as well around this. So anyone, or whether there's a message or just speaking to someone directly who still is going through the ups and downs of this, like sometimes what feels like an endless thought loop of body image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just firstly that I relate and I understand. That was my moment where I was walking across my kitchen and, I was doing my daily drills of counting my calories, how many I could eat that day, how much I had burned from my workout, how many steps I was doing, how many macros I could have, how much I weighed, how much I needed to weigh, all the data and numbers of the body game. And I just sat there and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to die with this loop on my body. I think for the rest of my life, I'm going to think about this all day long. And it's going to be the dominant thought I have all day long. And I just kind of let it go. I was like, yeah, that's going to be my life. And I accept it. And I just know how painful it is. So just honoring and acknowledging that, and honoring and acknowledging too that there is a life outside of it. And it is possible to make peace with it and to be free from it. And when I say it, I'm talking for myself about what internal family systems calls a manager or a moderator, or the part of us that believes that we're not worthy of love unless we're thin, or we're not worthy of existing unless we're thin. I know for the way that I grew up in the household that I was in the time that I was in, everything I wanted in life was on the other side of me being a certain weight, whether that was a career, love, friends, anything. And I had to really break that down and love myself even if I wasn't the weight I wanted to be. love myself even if I didn't have the body that I wanted, and really just become the person that gave myself the love that I had been denying for so long. And it seems weird and it seems impossible when you're so closely relating to the part that hates you. But with the type of work in IFS work, which you can do with a therapist or, you can do on your own, is the most helpful and gives you the most breathing room and space. But I think I would also say that, we're just so much bigger and far beyond our bodies. Like the fact that we are a soul and the fact that we measure most of our life through numbers of money, of, followers, of weight, of whatever. Like, it's just insane to think to me that our lives could be constricted by this one belief and this one thing, and that we would look so myopically at what we came here to do and we came here to be. And it's so heartbreaking to think that of all the gifts and skills and abilities that you came to earth with, of all the blessings that you have, that we're so focused on this one thing and this one part of our experience, just really crushes me. And just as a very last thing and tip, the most important thing I think that you can do is to feel your feelings. For most of us, we use food as a way to numb and cope and avoid and distract. And as soon as I started to really commit to truly feeling my feelings, and for me as a Pisces, empath, intuitive feeler, that's a lot. But when I did do that, I no longer used food in a way that wasn't serving me. And I no longer used food to keep myself numb from life. And not only did I eat less, but I enjoyed food more, and I feel better in my body because I'm allowing myself to do what it naturally needs to do, and that's feel. So feel your feelings. IFS therapy is super helpful. And then just remembering that you are a soul, not a body.
Yeah, I think Saturn Return invites this big reckoning, I feel like, in a way. At least it was for me, and all the ways I run from my feelings and how that, like you just shared, can contribute to so much of our own suffering. I think about this thought or saying a lot, like acknowledging how I contribute to my own suffering and all the ways I was conditioned to think like feeling your feelings is a weakness. The way I was raised, with lots of love and appreciation and humor for how I was raised now, seeing, sensitivity was not a gift. Being in touch with my feelings was not something that was celebrated. But a lot of times people come to my classes and say, like, I know I need this, but it's, I run from it. It's annoying. And it's something we all do. And recently on one of your almost 30 episodes, you were speaking into this idea of this part of you that seeks perfection and recognizing in the moments when you're still seeking it and loving yourself anyway. And I think that's a big part of Saturn Return as well. Not just we want to get rid of the thing overnight, the bad habits, the codependent pattern, the toxic relationship we have with money, whatever it may be. And we think, I often say to people, you spend 30 years living this way. Do you think you're going to let it go in 30 days? Like it's a process of learning how to love and accept. And the human part of us wants to do it overnight, but that would just be maybe a little too easy. And I'd like to think it could happen that way, but it's not always as simple.
Yeah, I think parts has helped me with that. So in IFS, so internal family systems parts work is a lot of what I teach and practice with my clients and at retreats. And it's my number one tool for self-love. What I love so much about it is that even what you're talking about there, the desire for us to change overnight, the desire for us to just get rid of the coping habits and, the bad habits and the things that we do is also a part, because actually the numbing habits and the bad things that we do, whether it's scrolling, social media, addictions like gambling, food, sex, whatever, are actually supporting one part of us dysfunctionally. So I believe that there's nothing that we do that is inherently bad or good. There's just things that parts of us do to support themselves because they don't have a better way. So an example with me with food, I grew up in a household where I was really overwhelmed. It was pretty chaotic. So older me is like, I hate the way I am with food. I binge, I overeat, I crave sweets, all these things. Like, that is all bad. The older part of me sees that all bad. But the younger part of me that's 5, 6, 7, whatever, she sees that as good because the food is helping her cope and regulate, and it's helping her to feel grounded and avoid feeling. And so when we can really see all of our actions and all of the ways that we exist and the things that we do as maybe dysfunctional. It's not the right function for things, but as supporting us in feeling better, it can really liberate ourselves to have compassion for the process and compassion for where we are. And then we can really deeply more understand why we're at where we're at with habits and why we are using things in ways that we do. And the part of us that wants to be done and get it over with and rush and finish is amazing, but it's also not loving and accepting and kind, because it's kind of wanting us to be at a place where we're not, and we always have to accept where we are at first to change.
And I find it's probably, I know a little bit about IFS. I haven't done as deep of a dive as you have, but I find it's so much more digestible that way too. And we're thinking about it as parts instead of the whole. We find one thing wrong with us and we want to kind of like throw it out with the rest of the trash. And it's just, that's not really how we operate or function. There's all these different aspects kind of in the book, the way you talk about you are a soul, God, career, family, relationships. There's all these parts that make up a life. And we want to categorize it into, a one size fits all. And that's just not how it works. So for someone feeling overwhelmed by the thought, whether they're in their Saturn return or any period of transformation, I hear a lot, and I see it in myself when I'm coming up against something where I'm being invited. Now I see it as an invitation to transform, even when I'm stomping my feet and kicking and screaming. But when I'm coming up against something that I know is going to take me to the other level or the next level or a different level of expansion, and those parts of me that want to stay comfortable, what do you recommend, or some advice you have for folks who know they're ready for the next thing or more, whether it's purpose, relationships, money, but they just want to stay in their little comfort bubble, which feels so nice and lovely, but, doesn't really get us where maybe we want or need to be.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Being at that place in this process, especially with the book, has brought up so much that I've had to kind of meet against for my expansion. First, I would say that I don't always think that being comfortable is comfortable. I think that a lot of people think that they're being comfortable, but they're just living at like a low grade happiness, or they actually don't have a lot of vitality and, chi in their life. But I think the best way to approach when you have that part of you that wants to stay small, or that part of you that's scared of expansion or growth, isn't trying to change that part or trying to force it into the growth or the expansion, but is trying to love it and like honor it and accept it as it is. And then build enough trust and safety with that part to just let that part know that we're going to the next level. I'm taking you with you, but it's a part of our growth and our expansion. Like, you're coming with me. It's all good. There's nothing to be afraid of. And when your parts in your system can meet and realize and recognize the inner mother or the self, like internal family systems calls it the self. It's the most powerful aspect of you, that infinite aspect of you that knows. The part of you that's made for more is the self. And when those little girls in you, the little boys, the parts of you that are scared can meet the self and be like, whoa, now I see that we're going somewhere big. I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel heard. It can get so much better. It can also be helpful to journal from that part's perspective. So from that scared little girl or boy, just having journaling sessions to understand what their fears are or understand what's coming up for them, because that can not only help you pinpoint what exactly is coming up for them, but it can also let emotions and feelings out to liberate that part from feeling like it has to speak so loudly or it has to be heard. And then what it comes up with it is where you can go back in time shamanically and really help to reprogram. So say your little girl is afraid of being seen because people made fun of her in the 3rd grade for when she was in the play. You can then go back in your mind's eye to that time and space and really help to soothe her, to guide her, maybe see things differently. Maybe you're taking her out of that time space, and you can do some pretty cool, like, spiritual kind of stuff there. But I think journaling is helpful. I think acknowledging the truth of it's helpful. And I think when you build enough internal self-love, it's much easier to bring all of the other parts along to the journey to the next level.
And you talk about that a lot in the book. And one of the things I really loved about the book, any sort of practical application is my favorite thing. We read, and then what do we do with it? A lot of books that I love too, I'm reading through the pages. Really?
Yeah. I'm like, give me pithy. I'm like, I want pithy short. I'm like, I want you to call me out. And I'm practical. I'm like, yeah.
I love when I can read. I learn by doing the thing. You could
Love
talk
it.
to me all day until I get in there and I'm doing it within my body. It's not going to fly. So maybe that's why. But in the book, I love after every section, there was not only journal prompts, but invitations to explore these parts of you and actually take it to the mat, not just read about it, but be about it. And I find that people are so eager, maybe you can see this or understand this as well, but people are so eager to change and dive into this transformation. And then you talk about the work that needs to follow it up with that. And they're like, whoa, I did not sign up for this. So can you just speak to that a little bit, how overwhelming this can be and it doesn't stop? I certainly, I would never say like, your Saturn return, you're done. Nope. That's not how it goes. But can you just speak into finding the balance between the endless invitation to transform and when you can, like you spoke to earlier, like feel like you earned the change, the growth, you can sit in it and enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of my work is how to find the balance between striving and self-acceptance. So how do we both strive for more and grow, but also deeply love and accept ourselves? And that's the age-old question of being a human on Earth. We seek and want growth and change, but also a deep part of our experience is to love ourselves just as we are. And I think right now there's so much opportunity to outsource your intuition, to get off your path, to do courses, programs, podcasts, YouTubes, all of this stuff to just keep ourselves sort of addicted to spiritual entertainment and addicted to being completely in the mind and completely in the experience of this like spiritual egotistic hunger where we're just kind of like addicted to knowing and doing and all these things. And not that I'm saying that spiritual tools and philosophies and learnings aren't beautiful and powerful and transformative. It's like a lot of my work. But what I'm saying is that there is a point in time where you actually need to integrate the information. You actually need to process the information. You actually need to be with the learnings and actually let life teach you. Like, let your life be a teacher. Live in the life that you're in and let life be a teacher. And so you can have that embodied wisdom, that cellular wisdom that you earn. And so finding the balance between, where we acquire information and where we let life lead us is one that each person will have to do. But what I found is that I now seek so much less spiritual knowledge and information than I have ever in my life. And now I'm in a phase of just letting life bring me to what I need to know. And then I have all the resources at this point and the tools for the place that I'm at to really learn and integrate everything that life is showing me.
And obviously life keeps happening. So you went through your Saturn return, you've written the book, you've like walked the walk, you talk the talk. And I know too, things are going to keep happening. Life's going to keep coming at me, whether I like it or not. And still sometimes in my knowing of that and all the transformation that happened through my loss, through my Saturn return, through relationships ending, jobs ending, all leading me to a better, more aligned version of my life, I still resist it. And I think that comes up in the book a lot too. Our habits, our tendency to resist, even when we're coming closer to alignment, the things that we're feeling most called towards. So how do you now, after Saturn return, being through all these things, how do you deal with the resistance that continues to come up in you in those moments? How do you approach it now with all the knowledge or information about yourself and the world that you've absorbed, taken on?
I think the simplest way that I approach resistance now is I just get curious and I say, "Ooh, what's that? Like, what's that? Like, there must be something really big and juicy on the other side of what I'm resisting, because what you resist persists. So whatever I'm resisting is going to show up at a different time, a different place, and it's going to not leave me until I explore it." So as an example, right now in my life with our book coming up, it's been such an act of me resisting the bigness of who I actually am and the power that I actually hold. And that looks like holding myself back. That looks like distracting myself. That looks like, staying busy, doing all the wrong things and all these different self-sabotaging activities. And so when I can get really curious, like, okay, what is it about my bigness that I'm resisting? Is it fear? Is it, a part of me? Is it a stress? And just really meeting that with grace and meeting that with love. But I've also seen in my life where the people that I resist or the careers that I resist even are usually the ones that I want. And so sometimes it's also like when you see something and you have a little shadowy feelings about it, it might be something that you desire. As an example with coaching, before I was a coach, I've been coaching for like a little over a year and a half now. And I love it. It's one of my favorite things that I do. But I used to be like, coaches, who are they? What can they tell people? Like, what right do you have to tell any? Like, I was like the number one coach hater. I was like, coaches are fake. And then I worked with the most amazing coach for over 2 years. I work with amazing coaches now, and I got it. And now I'm like, ooh, I love coaching. It's the best. So it's like also looking at what we resist because it's oftentimes a teacher for where we want to go.
Absolutely. I always said I would never be a teacher. I'm never going to be a teacher. That's not like
Wow.
I always said that's not for me. I'm a all this bullshit. These limiting beliefs I had around, whatever story I developed growing up around why I didn't want to do that. I didn't need to do that. I'm never going to have a podcast. Here we are. So it's if I've learned anything, it's when I have been better about catching myself when I say I'm never doing that. I get really curious about now when I say never, I say, oh, well, here we go.
Yes.
And again, it kind of brings, you said getting curious about it. It's this idea you kept presenting in the book about reminding yourself, reframing it, that it's all about possibility. You're in a portal of possibility. It's opening yourself up to what's possible. And I think also speaking a little bit to the language that we use, and I found even just getting curious in my Saturn return, I started getting really interested in the way I said things, why I said things, how I say things, and how that contributes. Even the never, like I'm never going to do that. And now I'm, eating my words because here I am teaching like 3-4 classes a week, workshops, doing all the things. So yeah, I think it's so interesting the way we put those limitations on ourselves and how our Saturn return invites us to be open to those periods of transformation. And I wanted to shift a little bit to this idea of purpose, because I do think now more than ever, my parents weren't talking about purpose. My grandparents weren't, my grandparents, if I asked them that question, they'd be like, to support my family, to raise my family, to make sure everyone is fed and clothed and taken care of. And I've realized in a lot of the work that I've done how privileged we are to even have the thought and the desire to
Just saying that.
have a purpose.
Yeah.
And the way I used to feel so angsty. I mean, all my Capricorn and Aries and Scorpio against my parents, like, life is more than just making money, and they didn't have the privilege to really explore that. And I wanted to ask you a little bit. You talk about family specifically in the book too. You wrote that chapter about your family and how your Saturn return. I know my family are my greatest teachers. They've certainly given me my personality and my sense of humor, and I am so grateful for that. And I found my hardest relationship in my life has been with my mother, without a doubt. And you've spoken a lot in the past on the podcast and the book, not just, family in general, but also like this mother wound and the idea of our parents being people too. So I just wanted to see what you had to share about that, because that was a big revelation. When I read that in the book, I was like, hell yes. Realizing my mom was just a woman, just a girl, living her first time on life with 4 Virgo placements. She's doing the best she can.
Bless her and bless you. From a therapy perspective, it's the process of individuation. And in life, as we grow and evolve, we individuate. And that means you kind of become an individual against the family unit. And so it's a natural part of growing up to finally wake up and realize, like, oh, my parents are humans and they're people. And for me, that was like such a liberating experience, because then I could take this identity of perfection off of them. When we grow up, we have this idea that our parents need to be perfect and they're always right. They never do anything wrong. all these things. And while that's good, it also creates a lot of pain, because for me, as an example with my mother, when you believe that your mother is a mother, and I'm talking about the archetypal energy of a mother is loving, kind, compassionate, self-sacrificing, powerful, protective, caring, all of these things. So we have this archetypal understanding of a mother. This is energy that's been passed down throughout history from our collective consciousness, the archetype of the mother. But when you kind of approach your mother with that archetypal energy and expect her to be kind, compassionate, caring, all of these things, and she's not, that can be very, very painful. And so it was very, very painful for me to grow up and realize that my mom wasn't a lot of those things. And, I loved her a lot, but she wasn't a lot of those things. And so when I got older and I took off that identity from her, and I was like, she's a woman that's doing her best to raise me and to be with me. And that's all I can ask for. And so the most liberating thing we can do sometimes is to let our parents be people and to remember that they truly are just doing their best. And that when we can no longer hold them to a standard of perfection and of all of these things, and know that they've struggled a lot in their lives and they took us so far and we're going further, which is so beautiful. That's the point. We can just liberate ourselves and also liberate them, and then come to a true and loving relationship, which is what I've seen in my relationship with my mother, where we've recalibrated to a really beautiful place where now we're in relationship and it feels freeing and it feels good and it feels like supportive of where she is and where I am.
And our families are her first little community or sense of a belonging, understanding. And, I think so many people, when they go through these periods of transformation, Saturn return or otherwise, are afraid to lose that acceptance. And when they're stepping into our purpose, I know sometimes my family was all very much, what the hell is this? I acting to breath work to Reiki to all of these aspects of newness. So what was your experience like, or what has your experience like been with your family with all this transformation and the way you've come into deeper alignment with your purpose, and how have they responded to that? How have you absorbed it or learned how to create more acceptance for yourself and them?
Yeah, I think for me, one beautiful thing about not feeling deeply close to your family when you're growing up is that, and this might be a younger child thing, this might be my rebel side, but I didn't really care if they liked what I did or not. And maybe there's a part of me, I'm not gonna lie, there's probably a little girl in there that cares about what they feel about me, but I had a rebellious side that really propelled a lot of my desire. And I've been so soul-led, and I've been just led by this internal fire to discover my purpose and come here for reasons that are beyond my comprehension. So whatever I was doing, I never really looked to them to accept what I was doing or validate what I was doing, because my soul was just so deeply guiding me to what I was doing that I didn't even have time to look back. But I can really appreciate people that care deeply what their parents think about their paths and journey and what their friends think about their paths and journey. But you'll never get to where you want to go if you care too much about what people think. And you'll never be able to live the life that is meant for you if you're listening to what people around you think. And most people are not living lives that you look up to or love or want to emulate or do. And so you can never take advice, or you can never, be inspired by people that aren't living lives that are beyond your wildest dreams. And so when we can let go of the perception that we need to do anything for anyone else or be anything for anyone else, we can really start to be ourselves. So I started to do that when I was in college. I really kind of created a boundary with my mom and my family after my parents' divorce, and that supported me in really just following what felt true for me. And then as a last thing, I think my parents, they didn't really know what to do with me. I was always just
Same.
yeah. So they were like, we just hope you're not in jail. I honestly, they were just like, we're glad you made it out, so there wasn't they didn't even expect me to be anything. So that was also helpful, because then whatever I was a win.
Absolutely. I asked my mom maybe 2 Mother's Days ago, what would you say to your past self about raising your children? And the answer she gave for me was something along the lines of she has a very thick Jersey accent. So it was she's going to do whatever she wants, whether you like it or not. I was like, okay, that's what we're going. That's what we're going with. And I agree, feeling like the outsider, whether I was or not, my perception of feeling like the outsider allowed me the freedom to kind of, even though I'm older, I'm one of four and I'm older in the lineup, I act a little sometimes more like the youngest, what you expect from
Yeah.
them, like doing whatever they want. And my sister, maybe the youngest, resents that sometimes, but it definitely set me up for this freedom. And I also used to consider myself someone like a constant, what makes a good person is being super close to your family in the way that's
Yeah.
traditional. And, and I used to feel really insecure about that. And it gave me a lot of grace and space for people who usually give the answer like, no, I'm not close to my family. And it actually allowed me to love, accept them, tolerate them even more through all like the loss and the grief and the upheaval we've been through. It's given me a lot more, surprisingly, like accepting it for what it was, a lot more patience and sense of humor about it, because they definitely have given me that.
Yeah. Ram Dass says, if you think you are enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
My favorite quote.
Favorite quote of all time. And yeah, it's just, they're the greatest teachers. If you think you've reached the top of that spiritual mountain, just go home and spend some time with your family. Because I got triggered the other day. What did my mom say? And I am like, I feel really good about it. And she said something, what she said, she was like, oh yeah. She's like, you could call me every once in a while. And I was just like, it was just like reptilian brain activated. I was like, I call you every week. Like just so frustrated. And I was like, woo, she got me. Like we're back. Like
Absolutely. Even my sister lives in London, and I was there for Christmas, and we were like, in a little tiff on the train, and I was crying and she was, and then she was like, I've never felt closer to you. It's like families are, it's so funny how we can just fall back into those patterns, create new ones, like how easily triggered we can be by even just like the slightest, a tone of voice, really. But I wanted to shift a little bit, and something I do a lot and work in this way is a lot with grief, and that was the biggest part of my Saturn return personally. And I know you have a really interesting perspective about that. I'd love to hear a little more about your experience with grief in your relationships and your family systems, even just grief of all of this change and transformation. I think sometimes we only associate grief with unpleasant, bad situations, death, loss. And a lot of times there's so much grief, even in the most powerful blessing transformation stage.
yeah. I think my first real experience with grief that I can remember was my first heartbreak when I was in high school. Fell in love so deeply. And I remember after that breakup, I was just in it. And it was just the darkest, the most painful. It was just so rough. And in my life, I've lost many people. I've lost many things. And I've gone through many different portals. That was definitely the most prolific because it was the first. And so my brain chemistry kind of changed from that point. My sort of psyche changed from that point. But right now, I'd say the way that I'm working with grief, or the grief that I'm in, is related to my dad, who's sick. So my dad has Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and he's had Parkinson's for like 5 years now, maybe longer, and then Alzheimer's for a little over a year. And it's just this nebulous grief. It's like this inconspicuous grief. It's this phase of grief that has no beginning and has no end and isn't final. And it's interesting because oftentimes you think that you're grieving something that's gone. Someone dies and then you grieve it. But in the process where you're sort of waiting for death, or you're not sure what's going to happen, or you're sort of in this long, slow period of death and dying, it's such a different texture of grief that has no beginning or end, like I was talking about. And so just really honoring that in-between type of grief that doesn't really have an endpoint or a final destination, and doesn't really have an answer, or doesn't really have like a clarifying point that would make sense for people, where you're like, oh yes, this person died. You're like, yes, then you grieve. It's like, no, I'm grieving someone that was here, that's still here technically, and I'm grieving them for not being here and then not being here then. And Alzheimer's has a particular flavor of that as well. So it's been the spiritual part of me is grateful for this experience, for the texture of life that I'm experiencing. And then the little girl in me is devastated.
Absolutely. There's no way to really, we can talk about it, but the feelings that live underneath it, behind it, that live with you are so, the only way to describe it is really to experience it, like really, truly and fully. And I'm wondering how all the work that you have done, continue to do, has helped you navigate your way through this kind of impossible time period of your life.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that in this process, I have such a deep connection with self and a loving relationship with myself and all my parts. So I'm so loving and kind to myself. So it's very accessible for me to accept myself as I am, where I am in the process. As an example, I was in Florida. So he's in Florida where he lives. And we were hanging out with him, and it was me, him, and my sister and some other people. And I was like a 12-year-old the whole day. I was just like, wanted to be on my phone, wanted to check out, didn't want to pay attention, like just bored. Like I just was like, just like, and then I noticed myself like at the dinner table, just looking at my phone, being like a little 12-year-old, just like not wanting to participate, whatever. And when I noticed it, I didn't judge myself. I didn't shame myself. I was like, oh, it's so sweet. Like, it's just, I'm overwhelmed right now and I don't really know how to deal. And so I'm checking out, I'm numbing, I'm avoiding, I'm doing all these things. And so I meet myself with compassion and I'm like, oh, wow, okay, let's check in for the next hour and then we can go back like on our phones, like let's just honor where we're at and what we're going through. And then we can plan to be on ourselves. So meeting yourself with loving compassion is the best thing. Just loving yourself through the process truly. I think also bringing people along on your journey is helpful. So letting people know, I'm in a grief portal, I'm in a grief process. I might have to cancel plans late. I might not be able to do these things. I might need you in a shorter time period. Like, let me know what you're available for and supportive of. So I think communication with your community is also really helpful because I found that when people are in grief, they want to kind of clock out and check out. And I've done that myself, but community is going to be a really supportive aspect of this. And then I'd say 3, just feel your feelings, commit to feeling your feelings. And in the process of feeling your feelings, you don't have to make sense of everything. You don't have to, I don't have to cry and then be like, I'm crying about that one time or that one thing. Like, it's just allow the feelings to move, allow whatever needs to go, and don't hold too tight to anything and don't make it something that it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, there is so much shame and this thing we like to hide in grief. I think it's still so taboo in so many ways in our society. We don't want to name it or we feel like it needs to be wrapped up in 7 to 10 business days, I like to always say.
Such a good one.
And it's just not the truth of it, much like this whole, the book does speak to Saturn Return. And for anyone who doesn't really know about Saturn Return, whether you think this is good news or bad news, it happens again in your late 50s, early 60s. So it's grief is much like this journey of this endless, constant transformation. So we've talked a lot about Saturn Return, about grief, IFS, all the things. But where would you suggest, whether someone will wrap this up, but is someone starting their Saturn Return or like really entering this period of transformation, where do you suggest they start, or how do they start, or what do you wish you knew when you were jumping into this?
So the Saturn Return period is that, really deep time of change and transformation and growth. And so I wish I would have understood that I wasn't behind, but I was just becoming. And it's really, really the mindset at this point in time. I wouldn't change anything that I did, but I wish I would have had a mindset to know that anything is possible from this point, that it's all leading me to better and greater. And I think some practices I could have done to support myself in this was to let go of relationships that were not serving me sooner, was to stop drinking sooner, was to start meditating earlier, and really start to take care of my body in a better way. But for anyone that's in a season of transformation and growth, just continuing to come back to possibility, continuing to come back to the potential for this to be something that you've always dreamed of and something that you've been praying for, because really all of the potentials are available to you.
Absolutely. As someone who has been through their Saturn return and does a lot of this work, reading this book and working through some of the journal prompts and the exercises has been the ultimate reminder of how endless this journey of transformation and seeking and working on self can be. So I'm so excited for not only anyone to really dive into this book, but also folks that are in the thick of it or just starting, all our Saturn and Aries babies that are coming up right now on their Saturn return and entering it. This information, I wouldn't change a thing, but if I had this book, I know it would have been a very, very different process for me. So I'm so grateful for you and Lindsay for sharing this with the world. It's coming out on June 3rd. I'm so excited for you.
Oh, thank you, babe. This was such a pleasure. And yeah, I'm just so grateful I can connect with women as deep as you. And I'm so grateful, that we've been in each other's orbit. It just means the world. And I'm really excited for people to get this book. I'm so grateful that you read it. It's just meaningful that people feel less alone and have a guidebook to support them along the way. So I appreciate you so much. I've had a great time. My kitty's been here the whole time, just enjoying our conversation too.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. And it's been great to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and being here. I'm so grateful to you.
Amazing. Talk to you later, guys. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Breathe In, Scream Out with Krista Williams. Having Krista on as my first guest was truly a full circle moment for me. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed chatting, connecting, and laughing with Krista. She really is such a gem, an amazing, beautiful person in every single way. And Krista and Lindsay's book, Almost 30, A Definitive Guide to a Life You Love for the Next Decade and Beyond, is officially out as of June 3rd, everywhere books are sold. So by the time this podcast launches, the book will be out. Please pick it up, whether you're currently going through your Saturn return or find yourself continuously brushing up against these pockets of transformation, which we all will for the rest of our lives. This book is so supportive, helpful, really grounding in terms of the reframe and possibility it presents, so you won't regret it. I know you'll enjoy reading it as much as I did. I'll make sure to tag it in the show notes, along with Krista's Instagram and, again, the Gemini season playlist that I made on Spotify. Next episode, I will be back with another moon episode, a solo, all about the Cancer new moon, Capricorn full moon, and some really juicy updates about some collective shifts in our outer planets that will be really beautiful and supportive for this crazy year that is 2025. So make sure to tune in. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, rating it, reviewing it, following it wherever you listen, and sharing it with someone you love or whoever you think might benefit from the listen. So grateful for your support and listens, and can't wait to continue to breathe in and scream out with you every episode.